On November 3rd, Governor Sergei Lysak provided information about attacks by Russian forces on the region around Nikopol in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, which took place 7 times that day. In one of the incidents, a 51-year-old man was injured and transported to a medical facility. According to Lysak's data, Russian troops fired over 30 artillery shells towards this region. The main target of the attacks was the town of Nikopol. The governor also said that as a result of these actions, 8 residential houses, 6 farm buildings, 1 community institution, and several power lines were damaged. The city of Nikopol is located on the mostly dry Kakhovka reservoir, in close proximity to the Russian-occupied Enerhodar nuclear power plant and the town of Zaporozhye. It is a regular target of attacks by Russia. Lysak also mentioned the tragic incident of November 1st when a 59-year-old woman lost her life as a result of a drone attack on Nikopol, and 4 additional residents were injured. Russian forces continued offensive operations on the Kupyansk-Svatove-Kreminna line on November 2nd, moving slightly towards Kupiańsk. Geolocation data from the same day suggests that Russian troops were moving west from the town of Orlynka, which lies 22 kilometers east of Kupiańsk. A person associated with the Kremlin and running a military blog reported that the Russians have taken up new positions near Petropavlovka and Synkivka, which are 7 and 9 kilometers from Kupiańsk respectively, and are still conducting operations in that direction. In turn, the Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian attacks near the previously indicated towns and Ivanivka, 20 kilometers southeast of Kupiańsk, were not successful, and no assaults were recorded in the Kreminnaya area. Another Russian military blogger wrote about continued attacks around Makeevka and northeast of Kupiańsk, and also mentioned that in the Torske area, 14 kilometers west of Kreminnaya, the situation had not changed much. The Russian Legion formation emphasized that despite the more favorable weather, combat activity towards Kupiańsk was moderate. On the other hand, Russian sources reported that on November 2nd, Ukrainian forces took offensive actions on the mentioned line, but without significant progress. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that it managed to repel Ukrainian attacks in the area of Sinkovka and Dibrova, 5 kilometers southwest of Kreminnaya. Another Russian military blogger described that the fighting on the Kupyansk-Svatove line is defensive in nature, and the Ukrainians periodically carry out counterattacks. Additionally, information from November 1st indicated Russian losses in the form of 7 tanks and combat vehicles in the Kupiańsk area. On November 2nd, Russian troops continued their offensive operations near Avdiivka, although no specific successes were recorded. According to information provided by the Ukrainian General Staff, Ukrainian troops successfully defended themselves against Russian attacks, especially in the areas of Severny, 6 kilometers west of Avdiivka, Tenenke, 8 kilometers west of Avdiivka, and Pervomaisky, 11 kilometers west of Avdiivka, southwest of Avdiivka. The spokesman of the Ukrainian Group of Forces Tavrisk, Colonel Oleksandr Shtupun, emphasized that the main tactic of the Russian forces is to attack with small infantry units. Shtupun pointed out that the intensity of Russian operations in the Avdiivka area is clearly decreasing, which may be due to the need to regroup their forces and the need to support them with additional troops. In turn, Vitaly Barabash, head of the military administration of the city of Avdiivka, pointed out that Russian troops are focusing mainly on the northern side of Avdiivka, carrying out decisive assault operations despite unfavorable weather conditions in the form of heavy rainfall. According to Ukrainian military observers, Russian forces have crossed the railway route near the town of Stepovka, 3 kilometers north of Avdiivka, and are preparing for further attacks, targeting the coking plant in Avdiivka. There were reports from Russian sources that on November 1st, their forces reached the coking plant and that they carried out combined missile and air attacks towards it, although Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense effectively hindered these actions. Additionally, observers from Ukraine noticed the growing scope of Russian control around the town of Opytny, 4 kilometers south of Avdiivka, and were only 1 kilometer from Severny, although this was not visually confirmed. On November 2nd, Ukrainian forces did not conduct any counterattacks in the Avdiivka area, either confirmed or suspected. Some Russian sources suggested that their forces had approached the southwestern outskirts. On November 3rd, the State Bureau of Investigation announced that it had collected evidence against parliamentarian Oleksandr Dubinsky. They accuse him of helping a man illegally cross the border of Ukraine. There are suspicions that Dubinsky enabled the brother of his life partner to travel to a neighboring country in Europe. It is suggested that the parliamentarian entered the man's false data into the official system, which allows him to leave Ukraine under the pretext of providing humanitarian or medical aid, provided he returns to the country. As evidence in the case, law enforcement authorities seized various documents, contracts, and letters that could be used to manipulate information in the system. Additionally, data carriers and mobile phones were also seized. On November 1st, the media reported searches at Dubinsky's estate in connection with allegations of illegal border crossing. The code provides for a penalty of imprisonment of up to 7 years for such an offense. Earlier in August, Dubinsky was in the spotlight for another reason. He was suspected of falsifying official documents related to his own trip abroad. It was reported that he was supposed to go abroad under the pretext of accompanying his father during treatment. But the parliamentarian's father left Ukraine earlier and returned to the country before him. Information about this came to light when an official letter from the Ministry of Health regarding a request for travel authorization was revealed. The parliamentarian was supposed to return on July 10th, but at the end of that month, his partner, who was on vacation in Barcelona, appeared on the social networking site. Dubinsky, responding to the accusations, claims that the motives are political and that the authorities are interfering with his family's privacy. He is an unaffiliated MP after being expelled from President Volodymyr Zelensky's party, Servant of the People, in 2021 for violating the group's operating rules and disobeying the party leadership. Ukrainian forces appear to be maintaining their positions and conducting offensive operations on the eastern side of the Kherson Oblast. Russian military observers suggested that Ukrainian troops carried out an attack near the towns of Poima, 10 kilometers southeast of Kherson and 4 kilometers from the Dnieper, and Ivanivka, 13 kilometers southeast of Kherson and 3 kilometers from the Dnieper, and also approached Kreminnaya, 30 kilometers northeast of Kherson Oblast and 2 kilometers from the Dnieper. Another Russian war blogger suggested that although Ukrainian troops temporarily moved west from the central part of Kreminnaya, they were pushed back to their original positions by Russian forces. Konstantin Mashevets, a Ukrainian military expert, emphasized that Ukrainian forces are maintaining positions near Kreminnaya and road and railway bridges in the Antonivsky region. He also noted that the Russians unsuccessfully tried to launch an attack near the Antonivsky railway bridge and towards Kreminnaya from Korsenko, 45 kilometers northeast of Kherson and 1 kilometer from the Dnieper. Mashevets also indicated that on the eastern side of the Kherson Oblast, units of the Air Assault Battalion, 66th VDV Regiment, 7th VDV Division, and the Motorized Rifle Brigade, 49th Combined Military Corps, Southern Military District, are conducting operations. He also added that Russian forces operating in the Khersonian direction consist of 8 brigades, 17 regiments, 8 battalions, and 4 battalion-sized units, including BARs, Russian Combat Army Reserves, and the Storm Z unit. In addition, Russian reserve forces in this region include 2 motorized rifle regiments. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is considering the possibility of holding elections according to the original schedule in the spring of 2024. This information was provided by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, during a meeting on November 3rd. During an online speech at the World Policy Conference, quoted by Reuters, Kuleba noted that the president was examining various arguments for and against such a decision. Let us recall that the parliamentary elections in Ukraine were to be held in October 2023, while the presidential elections were planned for March 2024. What is important is that, according to the Constitution of Ukraine, it is unacceptable to hold elections during martial law. Kuleba emphasized that organizing democratic and transparent elections in conditions of armed conflict involves numerous difficulties, both logistical and related to guaranteeing the safety of participants in the electoral process. It should also be noted that many people eligible to vote are outside the country or in areas currently controlled by Russia. A public opinion poll conducted by the International Republican Institute, IRP, on October 24th showed that 62% of Ukrainians were in favor of holding elections only after the end of hostilities. Only 22% of respondents would like elections to take place in March 2024, even if the armed conflict continues.